Guru Nation, in preparation for our upcoming Irvine 2025 meetup for Save Our Sites. If you're watching this in the future, it already passed, but there's probably a meetup or a conference happening soon. So go to saveoursites.com. You like how I did that, Chris? And at the end of the day, Chris and I, we talk about all things in research, but if we had to distill what we are in this space, we are site owners, and that's kind of what we're known for. And so this is a perfect topic for me and Chris, but it's the nitty-gritty, the reality of owning a site and the pros and cons. And we want to go really nitty-gritty beyond the textbook here. We want to just kind of discuss why we do it, why we continue to do it. Like we've had a few companies already. Why we continue to want to do more instead of doing something else. Like, I don't know, we can do consulting, we can do CRO, we can do full-time Save Our Sites, we can do full-time real estate investor. I kind of am, if anyone's watching.
Yeah, especially certain
This is
individuals.
documented proof. This is documented proof. 50% of my time. But the nitty-gritty of running a site, like why do you continue to do what you do? Why even consider starting a site? Why not just continue doing what you're doing, growing our DSCS client services, working on SOS? Why add more stress to your life? You certainly don't need more stress.
Who does? It's not good for you.
That right there's a relatively low barrier to entry to start a site.
There is, both financially and what you need in place.
Yeah, like financially and regulatory. As much as we talk regulatory on this channel, there's not much required of you to start a site. Now, to do a study, yeah, you got to be in regulatory compliance, but
well, not just regulatory though, Dan. There's really not much in the way standing in a person's way of starting a site. They need certain staff, and if they pick their appropriate staff, most everything they need is already is there, right, in place.
Right.
So it doesn't take a lot to start a site.
You need a PI.
Mm-hmm.
You need somebody to be a coordinator, because the PI is sure as hell not going to do it most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether that is you, the stakeholder, the principal stakeholder in this endeavor, or you hire someone, that's another consideration. And then you need a sponsor to say yes. And
you need an address. There's the third.
You need an address. Yeah. There's no virtual trials yet. You need an actual place where you're going to see patients physically. Yep. Don't believe the hype of decentralized trial and doing studies at home. Yeah, they're trying to make things more convenient for patients. We are seeing some studies going more DCT route than in the office route. It's like 10% maybe. But the caveat, the huge asterisk, is it's only done when the study's kind of on autopilot mode and the patient's through all the hard stuff, and it's only certain visits where they're like, okay, well, if you don't want to come in today, you don't have to. We can do a phone visit. And we can send, if you prefer, we can send the drugs to you after this milestone. So it's like when it's kind of like the bonus points of when the sponsor's like just happy a patient's still in the study. Like you could have withdrawn by then. So it's not, it really is to make the patient's life easier at this point. And I think that makes sense. Although our patients still prefer to come in. It honestly would make sense for sponsors financially, but it's you would still need someone to manage it, because ultimately this is a project management. A coordinator, as AI starts doing more stuff, a coordinator really becomes more of a project manager, I've learned. And it's not so much, the value is not so much in doing tasks, but in making sure just everything together is getting done. And so you kind of still need a coordinator for that. You still need a coordinator to convince patients or to advocate for patients. We have two very similar studies, and there was a recent example of one coordinator starting a consent with a patient. The patient was terrified of needles, terrified, and it was a self-administered injection. Terrified. The coordinator offered her another study where there were no needles, even though it wasn't her study. She referred it to the other coordinator. But that's being a patient advocate. I don't think a sponsor would do that. A sponsor, if they did a study like that and the patient said no, they would just screen fail, right? A coordinator can create something else. And for the patient, that's preferred. The patient would rather, if they've already said, yes, I want to do a study, and then the next step is, no, you don't qualify. A better option for that patient is, no, you don't qualify, but here's another one. And that's kind of the benefit of not being decentralized and not letting a CRO or a sponsor just kind of do this on their own. So there is some value in the inefficiencies as well.
So is that a pro?
It's a pro for the patient. It's a pro for the patient.
But is that a pro or a con to starting a site or running your own site?
I think it's both, because if you're, I know a lot of doctors, of course, they would like to make extra money. No doctor's going to say no. But a very important factor for Dr. Smith from day one, who's our PI in Yuma, was, will it benefit his patients? Like, that was a legit top one criteria.
Right.
He actually asked that before the money. Like, how much will it cost the patients? He thought they would get charged. And so I think, having options to give to patients, but then the added complexity that comes with that, managing all that stuff, it's a pro and a con. Being a project manager, site owners, the more you remove yourself from the day-to-day, which is where I'm at, the more you take on the role of, I guess, a human resource, but like career nurturing. But there's elements of that that's a pro, like watching someone's career evolve and knowing that you had something to do with it, and like watching them be successful later. Like Carlos and Rami, former employees of ours.
Managing staff interpersonally.
Yeah, those interpersonal, like, you know what? This person made me feel like this, therefore I'm doing this, and now, like, you have to like translate through all of that. I find it very challenging. I do. And this is why I have HR. My wife does very good at that stuff.
So what I found challenging in that regard is when it's illogical. When the staff...
Well, it's almost always illogical because it's all emotional. But ultimately, the buck stops with you as the site owner.
Sure.
And but you have to constantly question yourself, am I being illogical? Like, am I actually wrong? I have to ask myself that a lot. Why am I so upset about this? Am I wrong? And then that's where it pays to get other people involved too.
Sure.
Because it's the probability of you getting it wrong with 3 different people also figuring things out or chiming in is less likely that you guys are all wrong about the same thing. So, but still, these are the parts I don't like, but they are the necessary step to get to growth. There's growing pains. When it's just you and one coordinator, it's easy. And you'll never be more profitable than you, a PI, and a coordinator.
So define profitable.
Profit margin.
Okay.
You can do like 90%.
That I agree with.
Yeah. So like you can, and profit margins are important because they're very forgiving. You could make a lot of mistakes and doesn't really cost. But when you start getting more staff, more infrastructure, now somebody made a mistake. Well, we couldn't randomize within a window, and now we lost out on significant high 5 figures on a patient. I mean, now it's like a costly mistake, right? It's like it's It's like a fumble in overtime, as opposed to a fumble in a preseason game.
So I believe this video is pros and cons, right?
Of owning a site, yes.
Right. And we're
The
kind of
nitty-gritty details.
but we're skirting along, kind of.
Well, no,
We?
the cons for me, because everyone's pros and cons will be different.
Okay.
My cons are interpersonal conflicts, managing that. When it's me directly involved, I have no problem. But when it's me as the third party observer and the one in charge, like the judge and the observer, I kind of have a hard time. Because when you have employees, it's like having kids. You like them all.
Got to pick a favorite.
So I don't like that stuff. But I do like the pros, watching people, like giving them a chance to get started in a new industry and then watching them succeed. Hopefully, if they're good, longer with us than with other people. I also like giving doctors an additional stream of revenue, seeing them kind of get happy about that, and I actually enjoyed that part. And then networking with other site owners, I actually like that. Things like going to SOS, sharing best practices. What are you guys doing for your operations here? Like specific nitty gritty. I like talking to other site owners where you're not directly competing with them because they're in another market, and it's just pure what SOS tries to cultivate.
So you're avoiding the obvious pros, right? Intentionally, I assume.
Money?
Time, money, not having to answer to someone that's above you, per se.
Well, yes.
These are
Those
the
are
obvious pros.
I'm so deep into being a site owner. Those are some I've already figured that in. But yeah, to the people watching and listening, thank you. The biggest pros, I would say money, but like I know if I worked on Wall Street, I could probably make more. I just don't know that industry as well. But I probably could have figured something out by now. But I think that's a high stress life. And I do think site owner, once you get things on autopilot, it's not high stress. It's high stress at times, but the majority of the time it's not. And it is a very good, lucrative business to be in.
But there's been times as a site owner yourself in which was highly stressful, right?
On the other side of that, when you're not making the money.
Well, you are making the money, then the money dries up a bit, right? And that there's ebbs and flows. There's ebbs and flows in research, and that's a negative. That's a negative. The money can both be a positive and a negative.
I think that negative, though, the ebbs and flows, can be offset by diversifying what your site can do.
Sure.
There's certain pros and cons you cannot offset. Not that you would want to offset the pros, but there's certain cons you cannot offset.
To being dependent in one specific therapeutic area can be a danger.
Yeah, which is the owner has control over that. But like employees fighting with each other, even if you're very selective at interviews, it's going to happen. And so that's like an unavoidable con. That's why I was picking those things.
Okay. So you did a good job in kind of getting down into the weeds. So what would you say is the obvious cons and then the kind of more unthought of cons of owning a site?
The obvious cons are responsibility. You are not just responsible for your income, but for everyone else. And yeah, maybe the doctors can afford it, but the employees no.
So yes and no, I would agree with that and not agree with that. So I definitely agree with that when you're first starting out, because you haven't established yourself and you really don't know what the future looks like. But once you're established, I think that's a little less of a concern, or even a lot less of a concern.
Becomes more predictable. Yeah.
Yeah. So both being dependent upon yourself to make your own living, right, is a stress. until you've established yourself. I would say that's the most obvious con.
Early on.
Yeah,
and
when you first start.
The most obvious con is like not getting paid.
Yeah.
Like no guaranteed income. Like you have to start a site. Now you don't have to quit your other job, but it's a lot harder at that point. But you have to start a site, and you can take a leap of faith that you will have income at some point, even though you can't see it now.
And at some point can be quite a while off.
Right. So I guess the pros and cons, depending on what stage of a site you're at, is also important. And I'm speaking more from my current stage as in year 4 going on year 5, where that part's addressed already. But you're right, to people watching.
Well, that's why I said
starting like watching a movie in the second half as opposed to the first part.
But that's specifically why I said starting out, it is definitely a con having people dependent upon you because you're not even sure you're going to have a living for yourself. But as you develop and become more established, that's a little less concerning. And eventually it may not be concerning at all.
Correct. So I agree.
But it's definitely a concern initially, and it's quite stressful.
Now, once you're already operating, though, the stress, the money is good. The opportunities are good. I do think we are in, from 2025 to let's call it 2035, a golden era of sites. I do think there's going to be massive consolidations, but that creates an exit liquidity for the founders, for the owners,
for those who are established.
That's right.
And it makes it more difficult for those who wish to jump into the industry as a site owner.
Right. Some more cons are, once you have the system going at your site, you're no longer involved in day-to-day. You don't even know. Like, honestly, if I'm being honest, I don't know the studies we have, like, what you need to do. I don't even know on some of them, like, what the indication is. If a problem happens and it gets past the coordinator, past the QA person, past whoever's the team lead, and past Jaime, who's basically the chief ClinOps person for on the patient safety side, at least, it gets to me. And then I have to go dig through the weeds. Like, first of all, what the hell study is this?
So,
Jaime, look into Creo.
Jaime's the CSO, Chief Safety Officer.
Basically, without giving him that title, but yeah, I mean, he's basically in charge. He's like the buck stops at him with patient safety before the PIs. Because the PIs, they really just do the day-to-day, like what's the labs. But Jaime looks in detail, like every visit, and then he'll communicate with the PIs, and the coordinators will too. But if that fails, if that system fails, which sometimes it does, it gets to you being the site owner, in this case, you being me. And I don't enjoy that. Nobody does, but you've got to kind of go through another learning process. Well, that's when I talk to the coordinator one-on-one. What's going on? Like, how do you actually do this? And then you find, like, well, this coordinator hasn't even been doing it. I wouldn't have done it like this ever. Why did they do it like this? But then that's whose fault is that? It's my fault. The coordinator's just doing it how they think is best.
Yep.
I mean, they could be lazy. Humans will take the path of least resistance, but it's still someone's fault. And ultimately, this is the macro con. You're at fault for everything as the site owner. Like, it's your fault. No, anything goes wrong, it's your fault. That's the way I look at it.
So is it a negative having to take care of the HR part of it? Hiring, firing?
For me, yeah, but I have help. I know that in advance, so I have help.
Okay.
With somebody who's actually good at that. Or at least a lot better than me.
Me personally, I don't mind hiring. I don't find that a negative.
Hiring, I don't find it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like firing people.
I mean,
I don't
I
take
do
pleasure
know
in it unless I dislike them, and
I
I don't
have met
generally
people who
work with people I dislike.
me too. I won't hire someone I don't like. Although sometimes they like creep through.
Sure.
And then you're like, well, at least they're a good worker, but I don't want to hang out with them. So, like, pros and cons, and that, I mean, I don't know if we answered this topic well, but
the pros more than the cons, I think. But
well, I hope I threw enough cons in there. I mean, it generally revolves around interpersonal relations with people, at least for me.
So I would say a con is when you're starting out, the amount of time you have to dedicate. It's a lot.
That too. Yep.
It's a lot.
I remember when I started, I was pulling all-nighters before monitoring visits, like I was in college again.
Yeah, exactly. I've done the same. But as things settle and you become more successful, you should be able to at least somewhat control time necessary. And it's not always in control. Like if, for example, at YCT, if 3 coordinators got pissed for whatever reason and quit on the same day, it's going to be Dan on deck, I would assume.
Yeah, if it happened right now, yeah, probably. I can do a lot with me and one person for the time being. But yeah, we'd be definitely hiring. We're interviewing more people on Thursday. We actually got a pretty good one.
But
we already hired one, but we got another good one coming.
But my point is, you're like, for those who follow baseball, you're the utility player when you're the owner.
Correct.
If something comes up short, someone got hurt, and it's a body needs to be there, you're it.
Or you're the player manager like Bill Russell. He coached and he played when he had to.
Yeah.
For basketball, but yeah, exactly right. And I'd prefer to just sit on the sidelines at this stage, but happy to get in. I do always slightly overhire, especially when you're in a market like Yuma where it's the economics are in your favor in that regard. For exactly those reasons. And you can do a lot more if you get lucky and find some talented people. Like there's a lot more productivity and if like gains economic output that you can produce with the right talented people. So your rate limiting step of doing more shit is getting more people. And at least in a market like Yuma. In a more competitive market, you have other rate limiting steps like competition. But in a place where you're effectively in a blue ocean, your rate limiting step really is the people that you have. Which is good and bad. Good because you can just find more people. It's even though it's not easy. Bad, you got to start managing personalities and making sure everyone stays happy constantly. Because just because they were happy at one point doesn't mean they're going to be happy whatever you keep doing.
So, by making that statement, would you say you can get it? You can always get more studies than you need.
There's one study you did a budget on recently that I'm kind of even as of yesterday was considering not doing it, but we have the SIV next month. Just because it's like, yeah, we get another one. Like if you pick the right market and you have enough investigators, you can pick like the issue is not this getting the studies anymore. It's doing it and not driving each other crazy in the process.
We're in a more competitive market and you're not as well established, you're definitely going to be, as you put it, rate limit step would be getting studies.
And in those competitive markets, there are always costlier expenses for everything. Employees, rent, everything. But the budget arbitrage that you've been doing for us because you negotiate our budgets is no different than if we were in one of those competitive states, and we're not. And so we have some advantages there. I think that advantage is most directly represented in the ability to overhire, like a luxury of overhiring, which is good. But then you can create a culture where you have to be careful, because you can create a culture that's akin to the NIH in its heyday before Doge came in and made cuts, where everybody points to someone else. It's not their job because you have so many people. You generally don't do that when it's just you and someone else, but you tend to do that more when there's more people to blame.
Yeah.
And then it's correlated 1-to-1 with the amount of interpersonal problems you get. And then you got to make sure everyone's working equally and fairly. And so there's issues. There's a lot of issues on that regard. It's never going to be without its cons, but in different markets, you're going to have different cons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have to create a culture where it is very competitive for your employees, but to the point where it's not burned out. And that's the part that's impossible to do, I think. Then I struggle with that. But I think as long as it's good enough and you're hitting your personal goals, it's fine. And if you're not, and you know you can, you got to
Time
get
for
back
changes.
in there.
Time for changes.
Well, like pep talks and maybe new incentive structures. And if that doesn't work, yeah, time for changes. But I don't think we're at that stage in YCT. But we've had some. If I didn't step in and we didn't get involved, it would have gotten a lot worse.
Yeah.
And that happened already 3 times in our 5 years. So it'll happen. You got to watch it. I think that's enough of the pros and cons, man. I don't know how I feel about this pod, but I feel there was some good stuff in here.
Usually, I'm laughing because you're usually so optimistic about.
I mean,
that
I
was
don't
a
know.
good one.
I don't know if this was a good one. You guys let us know. What do you think? Was this good?
I don't know how much worthwhile information's there.
Yeah. Use AI to watch it for you, maybe. But if you made it this far, sorry.
God bless you.
It's coming to save our sites.
There you go. There you'll learn some valuable information there.
Right. You'll have more talking heads there, and not just us. Like, subscribe, comment, share.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.